Welcome to the Nature's Image Farm podcast. We're glad you're here. I'm Greg.
And I'm Susan. And together we're raising 7 kids on the farm and learning life lessons along the way.
So pull up a chair, rest your heels, and let's talk all things bees, homesteading, and the old-time ways.
Let's get after it.
If you're interested in nukes, packages, queens, or supplies, visit us on the web at naturesimagefarm.com.
Well, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Nature's Image Farm podcast. Tonight we've got the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat live, back in action. Brian, Bruce, welcome back. How's it going, fellas?
It's going good.
Awesome. I want to thank everybody who's joining us live tonight for the Beekeeping Chat. If you're checking out the replay later, or if you're listening to the podcast, thanks for spending a little bit of time with us. Looking forward to tonight's subject. We've got a special guest. We're going to be talking about all things queen introduction, the good, the bad, the ugly, when it goes right, when it goes wrong. What do you do when it goes wrong? How do you rebound? A lot to talk about. Looking forward to getting into that here in just a little bit. Want to thank everyone who's spending a little bit of time with us. Bruce and Brian, I know there's been a lot going on all parts of the country with queens and splits and swarms and supersedures and on and on and on and on. Bruce, talk to us about what's going on down in the Dothan, Alabama area.
Well, it's just we've had just kind of a weird, strange year. The honey flow has not been, it's been mediocre at best. Just really a lot of the colonies, it's pretty much just a matter of they're keeping themselves strong, but they're not packing away a lot of honey. And so it's kind of been interesting. I've never seen it quite like this before. And we do have the tallow flow, which is just starting, I think. And so hopefully it'll click it on here and we'll be able to have some good honey this year. I've seen a lot of strange things. I've probably seen more drone layers and laying workers this year than I've ever seen in all the rest of my years combined. I'm not sure what's going on. A lot of them look healthy and good, but I've just run into some issues. I'll be going through a hive that looked good, or thought it did a couple of weeks ago, and there's a drone layer in there. So it's been very bizarre, just random stuff. But I'm sure it's not random, but it seems random to me. So I'm not sure what's going on.
Out of the ordinary for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's right. But anyway, it's overall the bees, I mean, they look pretty healthy for the most part. They're pretty strong, and the bees are growing. We just need to pack more honey in is the biggest thing. I did get some queens from Corey and introduced him the way he said. I haven't been back in them, and in the next probably week or so, really maybe even by this Saturday weekend, I might check on some of those and see what the success is with them. But we'll find out. But that's pretty much what's going on, and just trying to work and keep up with the bees, and hopefully we'll be able to harvest a little bit out here the next month or so.
Feels like this time of year is like Christmas for some folks. You either love it or it's bah humbug. and depending on which end you are on queen return flights and swarms, if they're your bees leaving and you're not catching them, or you're catching headaches or they won't stick, it's kind of be the more of the bah humbug. But Brian, what's going on in your neck of the woods up here in Northeast Ohio?
Busy. It's funny because what Bruce said is going on down his way. Now, I'm not that far into like seeing any laying workers or anything like that, but I've had not as many queens take as what I'm normally used to. So all of my splits, other than one, so I had 9 mated queens and 8 of them superseded. So today I found virgins in 2 of them. I actually got a good video of one piping. It was just, I followed her for, not even a minute, and she was just doing her thing. So, it is what it is. It's just going to keep me on my toes. There's 2 or 3 of them. I got to go through the video just because I have so much in my head on what direction I want to go now. You know, there's 2 or 3 of them where I think I might combine back.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep an eye on it. And, you know, if it doesn't in another week, if it doesn't look promising, I'm not going to mess around with them anymore. I'm just going to say, that's it, combine back and at least set up a strong colony, you know, to hit the flow, because it's still early in the year. So another week, we're looking at what, May 17th. And I could at least have colonies that will pack on some, they'll produce a little bit for me. So, well, you know, it's a little frustrating. And, you know, we chatted and, you know, it's like you think you're just smooth sailing, and beekeeping says, here, hang on, hold this beer a second. Let me throw you some curveballs.
Bees are the greatest humbler I've ever known, and I think we can all speak to the fact is even when you think you've got the answers, you've got the techniques, you're going to do all the things that you have always done or always worked. Sometimes you do that, and then the outcome is like, say, what is going on here?
I know.
We're going to get into that tonight because we can, you know, there's I know there's the Ben Franklin quote we always say, if you fail to plan, then plan to fail. You can even plan to do all the right things at all the right time with all the right tools. But there's just something about these bugs in the box that always keeps us on our toes. It always keeps us guessing. There's a certain mystery and a magic to them. And I think that's what brings so many of us back to them constantly, all the time, just to try to keep figuring those out. I can't let the cat out of the bag yet, but we had an awesome day here at the farm. We had a visitor first thing this morning. Dwayne Spence from Indiana stopped out and kind of toured what we do here a little bit and picked up some queens. And I've known Dwayne for years on the internet, just for probably 8-9 years. Known him from back in the day. And so it was great I did see him at a couple of the Hive Life conferences, so that was cool. But yet he was driving back through from New Jersey and stopped in, and it's always fun to sit and talk about bees and hear somebody else's perspective and what they're working through, working with, dealing with. So Dwayne, it was great seeing you today. And then we had beekeeping and YouTube royalty come to the farm, and boy, was that fun. We were visited by the one and the only Lisa Gallen there at the Grammy's Midwife Suburban Homestead YouTube channel, and that was a lot of fun. You know, she was in town, and I said, hey, you know, we'll be here. We'll be in the shop from 8 a.m. until 12, and then probably 1 to 5 we'll be out checking in on cell builders and queens and things like that, and then from 5 to 8 or so probably feeding. That was today's outline, and then today happened, and very little of any of that actually got done, but we had one heck of an adventure today that you are going to have to stay tuned to hear more about. Lisa took some video. If I told you about it, you wouldn't believe it. But there were some things that happened. She got it on video that I think 99.5, 99, maybe even 0.9% of beekeepers have never, ever seen. Super cool. And I can't wait for you guys to check that out. It was a 1 in a million things to see. And it was really cool. So we had Lisa out for that, had a lot of fun, just kind of showing her around, showing her some of the things that we do here. And then had a little wild card pop up, and we had to phone in a friend. We had to phone in an expert, get involved with this situation to see what do we do next. Man, it was so fun. So Lisa, it was great having you out. Really enjoyed it. It was awesome. So this is the time of year where even if you're trying to do all the things right and you think you're ahead of the bees, you'll figure out you're either not, you are, or maybe you're living in some kind of mystery land where you think you're ahead of the bees, and then swarms show up and things like that. What do you do about that? You know, when you're making splits this time of year, and when we're trying to play to the strengths of the colonies this time of year, you know, it's way easier to work with nature rather than against it. So if we're looking at colonies that are swarming and they're putting on cells, and we're making splits and we're introducing queens, there's all these things that are running through your mind. Timing, when do I do it? Do I do it immediately? Do I wait a day? Do I wait 3 days? Do I cut down cells? Do I tape the candy? Do I put candy? Do I put double the candy? Do I use a 3-hole Denton cage? Do I use a JZ Beezy cage? Do I use a cage at all? Do I direct release? Do we put them in the front door? Do we smoke them? Do we descend them? The list goes on, and you can run yourself absolutely crazy with all the options on introducing queens. So tonight we're going to talk about queen introduction, when, why, how we would be doing that, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we're going to be joined tonight with special guest, the one, the only Yappy Beeman, to give us a little bit of feedback on queen introduction from his end of beekeeping, which is cutouts and swarms and things like that, a completely different side of the equation than most folks who are ordering queens for splits, or they're grafting and they're using cells, or they're letting their bees make the queens and introducing those. Or for a lot of folks who are getting in and trying, and seems like rolling the dice with virgins. How do you go about that? What works, what doesn't? It's gonna be a lot of fun tonight. And first and foremost, I just want to say, just because this works or doesn't work for us doesn't mean it's going to work or not work for you. We're going to do our best to kind of paint a picture of the context that we're working within and the results that we see. And then it's up to you as the listener to hopefully glean in on what we're talking about, the context we're working in, to see what may be applicable for you, or what is something that you would absolutely never, ever, hands down, unequivocally, ever, never do. That's why we have these chats, is just to bring this conversation forward, talk about the things that we're doing, and all those scales. So before we get going tonight, fellas, let's go around the room, or around the virtual room or virtual screen, and let's just briefly talk to everybody briefly about kind of what we're doing, the scale we're operating, and what our goals are. I think that helps kind of paint the picture of maybe why we do some of the things that we do when it comes to introducing queens. Brian, let's start with you. Talk to folks about where you're at in the country, what you're working with as far as scale. We're not interested in like this is not a, we have this many more hives or this many less hives, but we just want to understand the scale and goal that you're operating in, because it does play a part into how we go about some of these things like introducing queens.
Yeah.
So Brian, take it away.
So everybody, those that don't know me, I'm in Northeast Ohio, about an hour south of Cleveland. So, almost up near Lake Erie. I am, of the three of us, I'm more of the hobbyist, even though some will say I'm a closet sideliner. This year, as of right now, I think I'm sitting at like 20 colonies, the most I've ever had. Up until this year, I would always operate like 11 and under, 10 and under. Prior to that, for some years, it was 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 colonies was it. So, I've always kind of stayed in that hobbyist realm. That said, typically how I go about getting queens, now I've never messed around with virgins. I've always gotten mated queens. The reasoning as to why I've always been drawn to mated queens is because this region of the country, unlike down south, like, where you'll hear where Bruce is from and how, he goes about his beekeeping. This area of the country can be very harsh as far as the winters. We've had winters where we get snow from, in November, early December, and then we do not see green grass until March. So for me, not wanting to give my colonies that chance to make their own queens, I don't want to sacrifice that time. Sacrificing whatever it is, 3 or 4 weeks time for me, you're basically giving up a month's time in this very short window of a season, as it is. So that's why I've always been drawn to mated queens. Now, typically how I will go about introducing them is I will typically make splits and let them go a couple days. This year is the longest. It was like 5 days. Did the splits, moved. It's like an artificial swarm or whatever you want to say. I moved, the queen with a couple frames and some, had some good storage frames with her as well. That way she could, really just keep going. Moved them over, and that original colony, I then went through them before I put the queens in. And for me, like the process then of checking before I put the mated in is it's easy because I go through and I shake every frame, look at it. If I see any cups, any cells, they get smashed. And then I put the mated queen in. She's in a cage. She's got her candy plug. And typically, like last few years, I've had 100% success rate with that. This year has thrown a curveball just because, like I said earlier, I've had 8 of 9 superseded. So I went through and I paid close attention earlier today. I spent 3 hours going through a dozen colonies. So I was like looking at literally every sign just to see where were the cells placed in that, and they were all supersedure. So it leaves you thinking, what happened? Did I do something wrong? And I'm trying to rethink it, and it's on video. So that's the other thing. It's like, I don't think I did anything wrong. It just, you scratch your head. It's, you wish that the bugs in the box would have read the same book that I read. But like I said too, I probably will let the virgins that I found do their thing. And I might combine back 2 or 3 just so I stay, I'd be at, I think, 17 or 18 colonies. And that's like, I think it's been overwhelming for me, believe it or not, thinking about the number of colonies, because I don't know if, and this is 100% transparency and 100%, honesty here. I don't know if I can manage even 20. So it's going to be challenging. And that's why I stay in that realm, like where I'm at, just the hobbyist, and why I tend to only buy mated queens is because I like to take advantage of every single day that we have in Northeast Ohio in our beekeeping season. Yeah. I don't want to sacrifice any time. So, but this year will definitely be a challenge though. And it's I see good luck, Brian 20. Yeah, right. So, but I should shut that window. Sorry about that. But it leaves you scratching your head because you do everything right and you go through and whenever I do splits in that fashion, I always tell people you have to be very, very thorough when you're checking your colonies, because you miss one cell, what do you think that colony is going to do? They're going to look at that queen that you put in that little fancy cage, and she's done. So
let's get into that here in a little bit, and let's talk about, when we are introducing queens, what to look for, what to do, what to keep an eye on, because that does play a huge part, I think. And sometimes how they accept queens is what they're working with, what stage they're already geared into. Are they already headstrong on making a queen of their own? And just by throwing a mated queen in there, is that going to shut them down and turn the boat around? Maybe not sometimes. We'll talk about that here. That's a great point you bring up, Brian. So as you grow to Brian's closet sideliner 25, all these little moves make a difference. And when you start banking on growth or scaling or doing this or doing that, and you start to get your ducks in a row, when you put the moves on to make something like that happen, and then something happens and none of the mated queens that you ordered take, it's like, okay, well, now what? It can get ugly. And let's circle back on that one too, because that's a big deal. That's an important thing to kind of circle back on. Bruce, in your neck of the woods down in Dothan, Alabama, talk to us a little bit about what you're up to down there, what your goals and scale is, and how queens and introducing queens fits into your management.
Obviously, it's different down here a little bit. I think the bee basics obviously are the same, but I'm a sideliner beekeeper. I run typically, like right now, I'm somewhere around 110, probably colonies, maybe 120. I never know for sure because I make splits and I go back and, I'm not sure if you can really count splits as colonies until the queen is mated and laying. And so that's one reason my numbers vary a little bit, because I've got some I've put queens in and trying to get mated, or, I just am not sure how they're going to do. But I'm going to say I'm at about 110 to 120 right now, probably sideliner. I'm firmly in the sideliner camp. I do it as a side business. It is a business for me, but I also do love the bees. So I'm kind of in the middle there. I have a full-time job. Otherwise, I work in the hospital as a physical therapist. But as far as queen introduction, initially when I was keeping bees, any splits I would make or queens I would introduce, I just use the mated queens. In the last few years, I've gravitated a little bit more towards queen cells, and purchasing queen cells, it's much more affordable and it's a little bit less risky. If you buy a queen cell for $4 or $5 and it fails, then you can just recombine the bees or try again. It's not as much of a financial loss if the queen doesn't get mated or is not successful. Obviously, in a sense, I do prefer mated queens for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you want to improve the genetics, if you're doing cells if you're doing cells or virgin queens, obviously half of the genetics are from someone else, but half of them are going to be the local stock. And so if you're trying to bring in variation, you're going to have your local stuff. If you want to bring in an entirely new queen, entirely new genetics, or an entirely different what's the word I'm looking for, traits of bees, you need to have mated queens, because they don't need to get mated. But I kind of go back and forth. I do, for the same reason as Brian, I like the mated queens, because when they're accepted, it's like within just a few days they're laying it up and the hives just don't skip a beat. When you're introducing queen cells, obviously there's that time when the queen has to get mated, has to start laying and really get in her groove. And the thing I've run into this year with the queen cells I've used is just not a very good success rate. And I did some early splits, and it was just really a bad take. And so I think part of it was weather, and it's always risky when we do those early splits. And so I'm kind of a little bit, my confidence is shot a little bit right now. Brian, you kind of maybe feel that way a little bit too with introducing those mated queens. It's just like things didn't work or haven't worked so far this year like they have in the past. And so I am going to try some mated queens this year. Greg, I'd like to get some years maybe later in the year. We'll see if there's any available. I've got some of Corey's virgin queens in my colonies right now. Hopefully they're not virgin queens anymore. Hopefully they're mated and starting to lay. but I've got some of Corey Stevens queens I'm trying out right now to see how that works out. I've never intentionally introduced virgin queens before like that, so that's an entirely new experience for me. But obviously, Greg, you mentioned kind of what do queens mean in my operation. The queen is the basis of everything. The genetics all come through the queen, and so obviously it's the most important bug in that box of bugs. And so you gotta get your genetics straight. If you really are intentional about beekeeping, it's a good idea to try and work on that. So I'm working towards a better bee, towards a more gentle bee, and a bee that has all the attributes that you want to have. I think we're all trying to do that. It's a work in progress. I think our local stock here in Southeast Alabama is quite rugged. I think they're pretty good bees for the most part. They do have some tendencies and some attitude issues, some of them, that I'm trying to kind of tone down a bit. But I don't want to destroy the rugged nature of the bees. I want them to still be tough bees that produce. And so that's kind of what I'm doing, playing with the genetics, bringing in outside bees and letting them mate. That's one reason I like the cells too, because they can mate with the local stock. And of course, Greg, if I bring in some of your bees or Jose's or others, into the area, they'll be producing drones for this area for future queens that come in and the cell, as cells or virgin queens. And so it's all just we've just got an experiment going on here. I think in a sense, beekeeping, that's kind of what it is for all of us. We've got like a lab that we're operating out there, and the bees are the ones that actually kind of figure everything out, but we can provide the environment. We can provide the opportunities for them to do, hopefully move in a direction you want them to move. And that, I don't know if that answers your question, Greg, but that's kind of what's going on down here.
No, that's important, because how we go about it, which queens we choose, who we choose as the queen breeder, a lot is based on what our goals are, in the bee yard. If you are looking to turn and burn and just bust out some brood, then some of those genetic traits might not matter a whole lot long term, especially if you're not letting the queens mature or that colony develop where they're busting out drones and you're flavoring or imparting any traits or expressions. If you're looking for certain characteristics on maybe the frugality of a cluster going in or coming out of the wintertime, their overall gentleness, their prolificness, those lines that they come from, then choosing the right queen from the right person makes a whole lot of sense. And when you do that, those aren't cheap queens. Those are not your $25 queen. You're paying a premium for those. A lot of times those are being put together by folks with small operations that are meticulously handling and caring for every aspect of that queen rearing operation in ways maybe that I wouldn't say get overlooked, but just we at small scale we have the opportunity to hands-on meticulously every single aspect of it. Where the larger I think those scales get, it's a little harder, I think, to operate at that scale. And there are some fantastic large scale queen breeders, 100% for sure. But a lot of times I think what you'll notice is some of the large outfits that are making queens, they're making queens that are sort of I'm not sure what the word is. They fit an umbrella set of desired traits, which might just be raise brood, make a honey crop, and some of the other nuance might not quite be as important. Where there are certain specific lines of bees that really excel at some niche things that don't fit the overall arching umbrella of some of the large outfits. And those little individual niche traits might be exactly what you need in your operation to move your needle forward or to move what you're doing in a certain direction. And that's where I think getting into some of those queen lines are important. I wouldn't say boutique queen lines, but there is something to be said about niche offerings of specific traits, attributes from those queen lines that do make a difference. We've all seen the difference that some of those traits do, especially when you get into creating diversity, hybrid vigor, and kind of getting that overall gene pool mixed up again, bringing in some fresh genetics that aren't from the same standard family that you're going to find does make a big difference, I think. And I think a lot of folks see that. So I think we talk about a mated queen versus all the other options. That's why it really gets important. So trying to figure out how that fits into your operation, how to go about that successfully, I think makes a really big deal. I want to thank Flower Street Farm Bees for the $10 super chat. We really appreciate you. We appreciate your support. Thanks a lot for doing that. We definitely can't do these things without you guys. So thanks for that donation. We really do appreciate that. We're going to bring on our special guest here in just a minute. What we do in our scale here is we're a very small queen breeding outfit where we focus on nukes and queens. And we're able to do it in a way where it's a hands-on approach. Well, for us and our needs, we're able to graft and make all the queens that we need for those genetic operations, those things that we are doing to provide those nukes, to provide those queens. And then to do that, we've chosen to go down a certain path with genetics that we find are super beneficial, not only for our neck of the woods, but a set of attributes that are helpful, handy, and are beneficial for folks as they're trying to move their operation and dial things in to go into that more positive direction. And that could be frugality of the bees, how they might brood down on their own going into the wintertime, how they kind of wait until the time is right in the spring to jump, and then when they do, they just explode. The ability to maybe overwinter in smaller numbers and smaller clusters, and to be able to do it burning fewer resources. Those kind of things are big deals. The ability to maybe produce more propolis, more of that propolis envelope inside of the colony, overall temperament. All these things matter. And so that's what we focus on is producing those high quality queens at a very small scale. And we were, we had Lisa out, Lisa Gowan from Grammy's Midwife YouTube channel. If you haven't already, I'm telling you, you need to go over and subscribe to Lisa's YouTube channel, Grammy's Midwife. Brian, I don't know if you have a way to post a link in this thing, but you definitely want to go check out her YouTube channel. She toured the farm today, took some fun video, and she captured some things that you wouldn't believe it if we told you. And this is not just some cheap, cheesy tease, so you watch the video later. I'm telling you, the thing that we just caught on video, 99.9% of beekeepers have never and will never, ever in their life see this for their own. And we were able to catch it. It's super cool. And it's kind of like, but wait, there's more, because this storyline is going to develop and it's going to be something really special. So make sure you get in and check it out as it unfolds. Check out the Grammy Midwife YouTube channel. Believe me, you won't be sorry. So anyways, as far as queens, that's what queens mean to us. And when I was talking with Lisa, it was fun to be able to show her around and show her the cell builders and pull out some frames and show her, kind of what we're up to, how we kind of do some of those things. And, I mentioned it to her. It's what's beautiful for us is our family, my wife, all 7 kids, we all play a part with the queen rearing operation, with raising bees. And what is so special about that is these queens are living this life. The brood, the drones, everything about these colonies are here on our farm, living, feeding, foraging, living their best bee life right here at Nature's Image Farm in this environment. And we're blessed with the opportunity to be working with these bugs in a box right here. And a piece of our family's legacy, our farm legacy, a piece of who we are, not only as humans, not only as servants, but a piece of what we actually do with our time on earth goes into these queens. And to me, that is really special to be able to send, whether it's 1 queen to California or 20 or 40 or 80 to New Hampshire, a piece of us and who we are, what we stand for, and what our bees do goes to those folks, to their apiaries, to help move them in a positive direction. And to me, that is something really cool and really special. And so if you have ordered queens from us at Nature's Image Farm, if you're on the list, if you already have your orders in, I just want to say thanks. You guys make all this possible. I do want to tease that we're going to have a really special solstice queen offering. We have some really fun queen lines coming in that we're going to be pulling some new queens from. And I want you guys to be able to get a part of that. So keep your eye out for some offerings at naturesimagefarm.com on some solstice queen offerings. It's going to be very limited, but you heard it here first. You're not going to see us advertise it probably at all. But if you're listening to this podcast, if you're listening to the stream live, or if you're checking back on the replay, check out naturesimagefarm.com on that solstice queen offering. You won't be sorry. That's what queens mean to us. I could wax on philosophically all night long, because it's not just as simple as a bug in a box that lays eggs. There's a lot more to it, and how we go about introducing queens to mating nukes, to splits, to queenless colonies, and yes, maybe even introducing queens to queen right colonies. Why we do all those things, it varies. There's a lot of things going on there. We're going to get into it tonight. But first, I've got to bring on the man, the myth, the legend. You know him, you love him, the swarm catching cutout king himself, Yappy the Bee Man.
Oh!
Yappy, thanks for taking a little time and joining us tonight. Looking forward to you sharing your experience with queens. For folks who are living in a cave, who have never heard of the Yappy Bee Man, tell us who in the world Yappy Bee Man is and what queens have to do with all the things when Yappies live in that bee life.
Yes. Oh, is it my turn?
It's all you, cowboy.
Brian, who's in control of StreamYard tonight? Who's pushing the buttons? Uh-oh. That guy?
It's Bruce.
Okay.
When in doubt, just blame Bruce. He has seniority.
That'll work for me. So, the camper's rocking. I had no time whatsoever. I literally was at a removal, before I got there, was on the phone with Greg for a little bit, got done with it, and called him. Had to get things figured out at home, and blah blah blah. And through our conversation, he actually. How's my audio, by the way?
Fantastic.
Good on audio. Okay.
The picture, on the other hand, can you put the hat down a little bit further over your face? Perfect.
So it's like I was doing the bees, and then we was like, okay, and okay. All right, anyway.
Oh, don't stop. This is getting good.
Yeah. Wiki.
Okay, all right. Okay, stop. Okay.
All right, fine. So, while you guys have been listening to them for the last 15 minutes, I was eating red beans and rice that I made 4 months ago.
Oh gosh.
Dehydrated, froze dried, freeze dried,
canned.
Ooh,
What?
That sounds good. How was the texture of the rice?
Well, I didn't use rice. That's the problem. I didn't have rice, and I don't put the rice in.
So you had riceless red beans and rice.
Well, that's the finished product. Okay, you make the meat and all the stuff, put all that together, and then you scoop that out, put it over rice.
Aha! Genius.
Genius. But anyway, so I made a jumbo pot about 4 months ago, canned up. I think it was like 12 quarts of it.
Oh wow!
And put it up. And the wife was busy tonight. Blah blah blah. She's like, "Well, you guys could have breakfast for dinner, maybe some eggs and bacon and whatnot." And I'm like, as I turned around at lunchtime and went, "Yeah, that'll work with 2 eggs in the skillet." So anyway, I did that. But you know what else I got? I pulled the jar out because I haven't tried it yet. I wanted to see how well it was going to be. I also canned Boston butt pork roast, smoked it all. Okay, pulled a little bit off for dinner 4 months ago, and then everything else got chopped up, diced up, put in jars, and I canned that too. The best barbecue I have ever made, and to be honest with you, probably the best I've ever tasted. It was you cut it with a spoon. It was, oh my goodness, it's
send samples or it never happened.
I know. I was just gonna say. I mean, if it's canned, that could easily go in a box, and make sure it's packaged. And
Bruce, thanks for the $20 super chat. Now what I'm gonna do is try to con Yappy into sending me some of that world's famous Yappy barbecue.
Yeah.
I guess
super chat.
I guess what I'm gonna have to do is I'll make more because I'm gonna eat all that, and I'll just have to bring it to the next Hive Life conference. What do you think about that?
I think it's great. I have so many questions, and all I really want to talk about now is red beans and rice. Today was so crazy of a day. I'm literally, I guess, I do have some dinner here. I've got, is Paul Hale on here tonight? I've got Hale Hives, pure Louisiana honey. I do have some honey from Ricky and Ruth Rorick, Horizontal Bees. And I don't know if you guys know this guy or not. He's a pretty good dude. I like him pretty good. Very respectable. Just a super solid dude. I've also have some of this honey here too.
Huh. Looks familiar.
Bruce's Bees. So I'm going to be pleased. I hate to eat in front of all you guys, but Yappy, as you fill us in on all things queens and how queens fit into Yappy's bee life, I'm going to have a little bit of smackerel of some of this honey here.
All right, so let's go back. Let's go back just a little bit, okay? Y'all, we have, as most beekeepers. Now, Bruce may have a little bit more. Brian may have a little bit more than Bruce. I don't know. Greg, he's all about making them. But my question is, how much do you really know about queens? I've recently been requested to speak at a conference in Louisiana this fall. And I started putting some information together, and more recent than that, spoke at a local bee club in regards to something that basically the genetic pass along history of bees. And the more I got into this thought process and digging down in there, I found out, I started looking at the pheromones of bees, because I also have a theory that I haven't found information to back it up yet. But when a queen emerges out of a cell, I have always had this theory that she has a much lower pheromone footprint, or,
mandibular
release,
pheromone. Yeah.
okay, than, but it's almost insignificant. And then every day that the clock turns, it starts to grow a little bit more and grows a little bit more. And I never thought about getting into understanding the queen pheromone. I mean, we all just understand as long as the queen's in there, the pheromone gets around in the colony, and guess what? Everybody's happy, right? Okay, that's cool. As she gets older, the pheromone may wear out a little bit, and then they supersede her, possibly because of low pheromone. Now, that being said, I did not realize this, but an actual unmated queen has got a completely different pheromone that is highly attractive and purposely attractive to attract the drones. It is a specific pheromone to attract drones to her. Now, we all understand that math equation, but I never really thought about that. I believe that it was, as it goes and every day changes, it increases, but I've never really thought about the level. I mean, the variance, because now what that relates to when we look in our hive is that if you ever, when you guys get into your colonies and you pull that frame up and you see the queen walking around there, pay attention to what the bees are doing. They all turn their faces towards her, okay?
Right.
And they're getting around her. They're looking at her. They're checking her out. But here's something else I didn't know, and I love sharing this. They are actually getting some of the pheromone from her mandible that has 5 different chemicals that create just that one pheromone. She has multiple glands and multiple pheromones, but they will rub up against her mouth, possibly when they're feeding her, but also to receive that pheromone. And then they go out through the colony to share and spread that pheromone to let everybody know that we have a queen.
Cool.
So once she's mated, that pheromone in her body and the production of actually changes. Amazingly crazy cool. So that just a little part of it. When you're looking at an unmated queen in the colony, I find that they're real runny. They're like little spastic children, just won't sit still. Okay, that if you watch for that, you can watch in a colony where it'll look like waves just coming around that box because they're chasing her. So if you ever catch a swarm and you find, oh look, there's my little queen. Oh, she's so small. We put her in a little cage and go, yay, we caught our queen. All right, pay attention to the bees in the box. Watch them. See if you start to see that little wave like at a Braves game where all of a sudden everybody's going, yay, like that. It just keeps going because you'll see them following her around, trying to keep up with her so that she don't fly off, because you got the lid open and everybody's trying to keep up with her. Well, maybe because the pheromone's so low. I don't know. Bruce has got that look on his face like I don't think he believes me. But anyway.
Bruce, that's not polite. Yappy's our guest tonight.
No, I believe him. I believe, Yappy. I believe.
So, all that being said, my question to the panel is, why is it so difficult to requeen a Russian colony with a non-Russian queen?
That's very interesting. Has any of us specifically raised pure Russian colonies to speak to that?
No.
Bruce?
I have never tried that I know of. I mean, I don't know what a lot of my bees are, but I don't know. Yappy, what?
I've heard that.
I'm speechless.
I've heard that there's issues with sometimes queen acceptance when you are bridging some of these different genetic strains. And I've often thought about that, wondering, okay, well, what, biologically speaking, what would it be within the bee that would cause the difference? And the only thing that I can, like, we know, for instance, Caucasians are just propolis monsters. They just make tons and tons of propolis, or some don't. Outside of behaviors, they are leaving something behind in the colony that you could associate with a strain of bee. But with the Russians, on the other hand, if we're in the Apis mellifera family, what variants would there be, biologically speaking, where there would be a difference, if there is one? Yappy?
See, I'm bringing that question up because in 10 years that I've been doing this, there's always somewhere something that pops up about Russian colonies being so difficult to requeen with anything but a Russian queen.
I've heard that.
I remember back a few years ago, they were somebody was offering up a chunk of money, 10 grand, for anybody that could come up with a process to requeen a Russian colony with a non-Russian queen. Well, you know, so this has got me going through the thought process of the general geographical location of true Russian genetic bees versus our the Italians or the Carnolians or the Caucasians or whatever. You know, at what point are these variances off of the just basic European honeybee that somebody made up a name? Okay, I took this bee that, you know, with this quality and this one with this one. You know, I'm getting to the point now where I want to start doing genetic research in regards to that. But on my Russian colonies, ones that the traits show true Russian tendencies, I've not really had a full genetic Russian trait, but now they're real big. There's a lot of breeders out of Louisiana that deal with that, and I want to get with somebody to get a couple of those, because I want to mess with them. A true full Russian genetic. I want to mess with those. I want to see how they react in the hive, and the differences between what I see in my Italians or my Carnolians or my just really pissy ones that make me think they're Russian.
I don't wonder if it does have something to do with physical attributes, because while it might not seem like a super huge difference, I really think that it does make a difference when you get into maybe some of the bees that historically maybe came from little colder climates, or they have a different, they are physically set up to be able to forage or access different size flowers and nectar sources, meaning like for the Caucasian or the ones that have a slightly longer proboscis, they're able to access and possibly get into and use maybe a little bit different nectar sources. It's not out of the realm of possibility that within the mandibular area of the bee, or is it the glands themselves? Is there just enough of a difference? Is it possible they're leaving a heavier trace behind of the pheromone, leaving things behind a little bit longer? If that were the case, though, this is where one question just leads to another question. If it was a biological difference with the different strain of bee, and let's say that they were doing something like leaving behind a secretion or a pheromone, or leaving trace residues of mama behind longer, you really get into a situation where if you're requeening with this is hypothetical and we can get lost in the weeds quick, but let's say we did have a pure Russian colony, and let's say for whatever reason we make a split, and we were trying to then make a split with another pure Russian queen, because we think if we add a Carney or Caucasian or an Italian or you name it, there's going to be an acceptance issue. If it is due to that pheromone, you start to get lost in the weeds quick, because then a lot of the beekeeping practice rapidly changes and how you would go about doing that. Meaning, for some of us, I know we'll get into it here, the time interval that we give or don't give to a colony once we either remove a queen and let them go queenless, the longer we let them go queenless to make cells, knock all the cells down, and get them into a hopelessly queenless scenario. If we get into a situation where if the queens have a variance on how long that those secretions are hanging out, you get lost in the weeds quick, because the 24-hour queenless rule, or the 3-day queenless rule, or the hopelessly queenless after 4 days, and they don't have a viable aged larva to make a queen, therefore they accept whatever you give them, slowly goes out the window. If no matter what you give them, they won't accept it unless it is of their same like kind. It's super interesting, and you just end up having more questions than others. You would think, okay, if it's a pheromone or a scent or one of those things that's getting passed, and that's one thing. If it's an attitude or a vibe, or somehow, do these bees have some kind of ability to discern variances and discern types that we have no idea? And this is all, of course, going under the assumption that there is actually a challenge with requeening a Russian colony with anything other than a Russian queen bee. More questions, Yappy. I've got more questions for your questions.
No, but I love the avenue that you went, because if I just pull a queen out and I've got one in a cage and I put her in there with the Russian bees, all right, and leave her in there for a couple of days, over that short time, will they then accept her knowing that the old pheromone's gone? I mean, the pheromone remnants of the old queen being in there, how long will that last, or how long does their memory go? Now, do you know bees have short-term and long-term memories?
Interesting.
Now, This is what's crazy. Short-term memory of a bee. Today, unless it was raining real bad, a bee left one of your colonies, and it flew where it was told to go. You go this far, waggle, 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 and then spin, spin, spin. You make a left turn, and you go so far, then you find the nectar source. We know that bees orientate to the colony by doing their little orientation flights. They do the short ones. They come out and land, come out and land. The next day, they come out and they do figure eights. Okay. That helps them to mentally set a GPS through the sun, through, landmarks to a colony right then and there. Okay. But they also will use landmarks in their short-term memory to a food source. So today they went out and they turned right and they saw this big tree with a yellow looking something, which ended up being a yellow house. That was a landmark to them, and they turned right. And when they turned right, they went so far to find that nectar source. In a short-term memory, they actually will get up tomorrow and remember that same muscle usage. All right. In coordination with landmark visual, and go to a nectar source. That short-term memory is where we start, the books all tell us. I caught a swarm, or I made a split. I did something. I removed bees. I bring them home, and I put tree limbs in front of put them in a box and put tree limbs and everything. It forces them to have to reorientate.
Yeah.
But Randy, 628 Dirt Rooster, I hate it when he does this.
Come on, Randy.
Yes, I'm going to tell you, he has told me 1,000 times. I went and got these bees. Oh, I got to go out in the yard, and I got to unlock these bees I did from 2 days ago. What do you mean you got to unlock them from 2 days ago? You literally locked these bees up for 2 days? Yeah, And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a couple of days ago, I'm reading this thing and couldn't find out. It takes 2 to 3 days for them to lose that short-term memory. Make sense?
Yep, got it.
It forces them to have to reorientate,
and
that's what it's doing.
Nice. Yep.
They have long-term memory, and I'm not even going down the long-term memory road. But in the short-term memory process, bees can actually they've got a 2 to 3 day memory of different things that we would talk about. It's crazy. So if that's the case, you might be with the thought process that we remove a queen and we make them to a point where they can't make the new one. 2 or 3 days from now, I go out there's going to be queen cells everywhere, right?
Sure. Right.
Okay. So I start going through that colony and I remove all of the queen cells and I drop an Italian queen in there. and she's in that cage where it's going to take 2 or 3 days for them to get to her, to get her out of there. All right. And even though that window's still there, I may still have to go back in and remove some cups. But I mean, I'm going to play with that. I literally want to play with that. I want to see, with a true Russian genetic, some of the things that you and I were talking about. Because now, what you spoke on this earlier. Let's talk about the introduction of queens on just the basic, no parameters around it. A few years ago, I was in one of my colonies and opened it up, and I got queen cells everywhere. And me personally, part of my management process is I will pull a frame out, and I will wait to find 2 queen cells on the same side of one frame in that colony. Depending on what time if I'm going to make splits, that's another thing. I'm just talking about certain times. Every other queen cell in that box gets pinched. All right. Example is towards the fall. All right. We had a real great goldenrod flow. Something happened. Get in that thing, and I got queen cells everywhere. So I've got this one frame and I tell everybody, I leave 2 on there, same side. This one comes out, it's going to go deal with this one, or vice versa. But in this one colony, I did not want to take a chance on one of them coming out and not killing that other cell. So I left 1 single cell. And as I started to put that thing back in there, I bumped this only remaining cell that I did not pinch. I've got I've got nothing.
Oh.
And that was the one part of the reason why I said, you always have 2, right? So to fix the problem, I literally popped the lid on the colony right next to me. And I could have pulled a frame out, gave them eggs, and went through the whole process again. Could have tried to order a queen. There's a lot of things I could have done. But I pulled the queen out of the colony, literally right next to the one I was working on. Pulled the queen out, had her in my fingers. Can you see that queen? Okay, picture it. And I literally take.
She's pretty. Nice queen.
You like that?
Wow.
But I literally just puffed some smoke in there and just dropped her in. No big deal.
You can't put a queen in without a cage. How dare you?
What I did. And come to find out, it really didn't matter. But there's 2 reasons. And there's one that you're not thinking of. Why they?
How do you know what I'm thinking?
Because you're still stuck with, why did I put her in a cage?
I'm on red beans and rice. You're right.
No, forget the red beans and rice. It's the pork you want. Well, here's the thing. We've always been told that if we're going to remove a queen for whatever reason, that, wait 24 hours and then introduce the new one and then let them eat the candy out of there, and it takes 3 or 4 days, and by then they've accepted her. That is great advice. Great advice to the first year, second year beekeeper who's not into raising queens or doesn't have the ability to get one or, manage differently. I personally can fix my own problems, but I don't have a problem with taking a queen out, putting her in a cage for whatever reason, and I'll deal with her later. And literally I will smoke the stew out of that colony, drop another queen in there, and put the lid back on and go on about my business, and never have a problem with it.
Yappy, would you do that with a virgin queen or just a mated queen?
I'm thinking the virgin queen, personally, I think it would get along a whole lot better, but the pheromone's different. Okay, take one out, smoke them, and then put that in there. That would be an interesting, because I've never really walked through the process. But the pheromone of that unmated is completely different from that of the mated. The mated queen, her pheromones are the security of the colony. That's what keeps the peace. It's not what she says or what she does. They just know we have this particular pheromone, which is the pheromone that means we will continue on. The lifeblood, the reproducer of our colony, not the colony's brain, which is all of them together. I think a mated queen she's a security blanket for them. She's not the queen with the staff and the crown. She's a security blanket. As long as, it's like having $10 in your pocket when you're hungry. You can go get something to eat. Make sense?
You're digging into something here that I think we should spend just a couple minutes talking about, and that was a great question, Bruce. When you are taking, folks might be thinking, well, why in tarnation would you be pulling a queen out of a colony and caging it just to put another mated queen back in the colony? I don't understand. On what world are you living in where that would even be necessary? A lot of times, if you're raising queens or you're making splits, you're making nukes, you always have different, how do I say this? Different, I don't want to, different strengths of colonies as they're doing all that work. It's also a way, if you think about it, as risk mitigation. You might have a 2-frame box or a mating nuke that has a mated queen in it, and she's laying and performing, and everything is great with mama, but the force of that colony is very tiny and small. Okay. You might be selling somebody a queen who is a 21-day queen, but she might be in a larger colony size, right? There's a certain vibe and an essence along with that. Both queens could be grafted at the same time, went on mating flights at the same time, but those cells could have been put into 2 different strengths of colonies. One colony is a little bit further along. They've got more resources to collect, to care, to nurture, right? And then the other queen could almost seem a little bit far behind, not in her physical development, but the colony's development. And so when you're looking at it as which would be the better queen, well, we have a better snapshot of what this queen in this large colony can do, because we can see that force that she's working within. So if I'm sending somebody a queen, I'm sending the queen out of the really juicy colony, cage her, she goes off, and I immediately can set this next queen back here from this 2-frame split. I just like Yappy said, we can take her immediately out of that colony, in my experience, and put her into that larger colony and let her go to town and have the advantage of that full entire field force. What I notice is that the bees don't care. As long as there is a mama who is just ready to go and doing her job, they get on with it. Now, what's interesting to think about is there a difference on which perfume mama wears? Does she have a different swagger? Is there a different thing? Are they able to pick up on it? Do they really care? What that does now is gives you the opportunity in that smaller split or that mating scenario is to go ahead and then drop a queen cell and start the queen mating process again inside of a smaller box where you're risking less resources to do it. Meanwhile, you're moving those juicier queens up and up and up in the program. It's a fantastic way to do it. Here's something I want to think about. The 24-hour rule. Most folks will say 24 hours. Get a colony queenless for 24 hours, and then introduce that caged mated queen to that colony. Yappy, you brought up some really interesting points about bees short term, and I guess we won't even go into the long-term memory aspect of it. But let's think about this for a second. If we are, and we advise folks 24 hours. If they can go hopelessly queenless, even better. But we always have pretty good luck with the 24-hour window. Now, if the bees do have a short-term memory, and if it is 3 days, which I do believe that it is, because we can make splits, as many splits as we want, mating nukes right in our same yard without moving bees anywhere. If we do what you mentioned Randy does, and we lock them down for 3 days, we keep them in the shade. They've got plenty of ventilation. They've got plenty of feed. Everything's fine in the colony. When we turn them loose, the first thing those rascals do when they come out is they start doing figure eights, and they start finding out, okay, well, where is home now? Something, it seems like it resets with them with 3 days. Okay. So that being said, if you talk about just a 1-day time period where they don't have a queen, and then we're giving them another queen, we're giving them a queen that is made and was juicy and hot and ready and just beautiful, but now she's in a cage. And now I think something happens to her while she's in a cage where she as big and voluptuous as she is, I think something happens where it starts to diminish the more time she spends in that mated cage. And I think it starts pretty quick. In my opinion, I feel like that starts pretty quick. So when we were giving them that queen 24 hours later, it's almost asset protection putting her in that cage. So even though those bees may have a 3-day memory, they're not able to get in right away and start to tear her up and say, hey, you're not what we had. You're not who we want quite yet. they have a little bit of time. And if you think about it, when we put candy plugs inside of queen cages, it's usually about a 3 to 5 day interval before they can eat through the plug. Why is that? I think it goes back to what you said, Yappy. It's short-term memory. They lose the memory of having the other mama. They know now that they don't have those pheromones circulating. But what's interesting to think about, another question for a question, why is it that when we pull mated queens out of a colony, within seconds, for me, when I pull a queen out, their roar changes. Now they go into mass fanning mode. If they are circulating, the mandibular pheromone is being left all over the comb. They're circulating that to each other, right? Within seconds, it seems. It's almost as though they know it's like when you walk into grandma's house and she's got that Glade plug-in right by the front door, and you just walk in and you can't breathe and you're choked out by summer breeze smell coming out of that Glade plug-in. All of a sudden, if we walk in the house and, oh, summer breeze isn't here anymore, there's no, like, you pick up the difference in those environs when those things do change. So when bees are accepting queens and we're introducing queens to them, if the pheromone or the deposits from the queen are gone after 24 hours or gone soonly after, and they have a reset in their memory after 3 days, why are they changing their tone and seem to be fanning, trying to circulate and find out where mama is seconds after pulling her? Yappy, take it away.
Picture an aquarium with water in it, little fishies, and then little bubbles going up. Okay, that is an entire ecosystem. Do you understand?
Yep.
Now, put yourself into a beehive, not an ecosystem, but same basic scenario. You've got a box, 10 frames, a bunch of bees. Okay, how do bees communicate? Every bee has a pheromone related to its job duty. A bee comes out of a cell and it goes around and it's got to clean up its mess. And for the first week, they clean house, right? They're cleaners the first week, right? The second week, they go around and they're feeding their feeders. They're feeding mother babies and making sure everything, telling them, hey, go clean up your mess and whatever else. Each bee has a pheromone related to its job duty, per Jamie Ellis. Okay? So the week-old bees smell like Dawn dish liquid. All right? From a week to 2 weeks, all right, they got little nurses' hats on, all right, and they're passing out bread. Okay? They're the feeder bees. And then after about so long, they turn around and they say, okay, well, hey, you're old enough to get out here and go, orientate, do your thing. Now you're a grocery getter. And at some point in there, they get back and, hey, I can't carry the groceries anymore. My wings are just about beat up. I'm really tired. And then they have, whatever other duties. I think the older ones are the ones that hang out and do the guarding, as well as all the cleaning of the front porch and making sure everybody that's coming in is supposed to be there. And that's how it goes. Now, if the books say differently, it's okay. So in this box, you have a whole world of pheromones. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. That's their communication process. Because guess what? It's dark in that box. And that's how they communicate in the dark, is with the pheromone and the balance of the pheromone. And guess what you just did? You took that lid, you popped it up, and you put puff, puff, puff in there, and you put the lid back down. You set your smoker down over there, and then real easy, if you did it right, you pulled that lid up. But all that pheromone communication and everything else that was going on in there is now gone. Their communication process is completely disrupted. And what's the one most important thing that they want to know they've got?
Mamacita. Is she here? Is she working?
So the lid's open, the air's coming in, the communication's gone out, and all of a sudden one of them goes, hey, where's mom? The other one goes, I don't know.
Mom,
yeah.
mom.
Anybody there? So are we there yet? So they start the fanning and they're putting out they're trying to stir the air in the box to try to find her pheromone. And if they don't find it, they may actually even fan and start putting the pheromone out just in case she went airborne, because they can't find her.
Right.
To try to get her back. And sometimes, yeah, I mean, it can happen within seconds. Sometimes it could happen within, it may take them 20 minutes. But once that happens, you'd be really surprised that you can take a queen from another colony, set her right up on top of there. She'll walk right down in there, put a gigantic orange dot on her, and check it in 3 days and tell me she ain't still there.
That's totally awesome. And the question, we had a question pop up.
Yes,
this is totally related here. And if you from Flower Street Farm Bees, if you remove a queen from a colony for a couple of days and then return that same queen, will a colony remember her?
Will the colony remember her, or will they just be happy that they've got a pheromone that says we have a mated queen?
I'm gonna, and we may differ here, and I'm gonna back mine up with something that just happened to me. I'm going to say after a couple days, maybe not. After one day, 100%. Because after one day, when we're working with our finisher and starter, we're in a situation where they are queenless, right? With the queen over top of a double screen board. And then one day later, we flip all of that back over again, and we put them between a queen excluder. Now, while they are able to keep heat through that screen, they may still be able to pick up on the fact that she's in the colony, but they still do it in a way where they will just starting every single cell you give them in the bottom box, because mama's over top of them. I don't think that they pick up on that pheromone quite as much, because they start going to town making nearly every graft you throw at them. After 24 hours, we come in, take out the double screen board. Mama was on top. Mama goes now on the bottom. An excluder goes over the top of her. Our other box goes now back on top in the very top part of the colony. Everybody can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And guess what? They accept her back, no problem. But I will say, if you forget to flip your starter and you let them go for 3 to 5 days, you know what they do? Why mama is still even in there? They start making cells everywhere. And eventually, they will supersede mama with those cells. And when that's one of your prized breeder queens, that's one of those, that hurts. Ask me how I know. What's interesting is the question was, if you remove a queen from a colony for a couple days and then you return the same queen, will they remember her? That gets to be really interesting. And it ties in what we're just talking about with, there's a difference between, okay, mama's not making bacon eggs like normal and we don't smell anything come out of the kitchen. Let's freak out, right? And we know something's wrong and we all start hollering, mom, 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 where's, right? But to remember that we had mom in the kitchen, right? And after 3 days, do they forget that they had mama in the kitchen, and they will take anything that you give them? With they're reorienting, because otherwise, if that wasn't the case, then why are we introducing queens in cages to begin with? Other than it's easy to ship and put attendants and do all this and all that. If it wasn't for good reason, we would be direct releasing those rascals right out of the cage. Just because she's a mated queen doesn't mean she has the voluptuousness of all those pheromones circulating back and forth like she does. So there's a lot of little nuance in there. The reason I say that is I just made a super huge mistake, big fat mistake, and it totally just burns my britches that I did it. But I did it, and I'll explain what happened. I went into one of my beautiful prized overwintered queens that I had planned on making $500 or $600 off of. Okay. What I did is, to protect her from a colony that was building, I pulled her from her double deep that overwintered. Okay. And they were so fat that I took her in 4 frames and put her into a 10 frame deep. And I moved that whole configuration to a different part of the farm, right? I put her in a situation where I can monitor. I gave her a big enough force that she can continue to graft, or she continue to lay eggs in a timely manner. There's enough force where she will be filling out full frames of eggs that go into larvae. So I have grafting material. Okay. Everything's fine. Everything's cool, right? I did that in another colony, and I just put them into like a 3 frame split. So now I've got 2 beautiful queens right behind where I need, so I can just walk out, grab my grafting material, go into the grafting shack, do what I have to, return the grafting material. Well, as I'm grafting this last round of grafts, I go over to find the grafting material in one of the 10 frames. And guess what? There's no queen in there. Okay, what in the world happened? She was in there when I put her in. Everything was fine, right? All of the eggs, everything timed out. What in the world happened? Who knows? She was there when I put her in there. Everything was fine. Who knows what happened? So I said, okay, well, they've been queenless now for looks like 5 to 7 days. They'll readily accept the hot, juicy queen, right? So what does Greg do? Makes the idiotic mistake. I go to where I had 3 frames of bees, a way smaller field force. There just wasn't enough of them to do all of the work for her to fill out frames worthy enough to be grafting from. So I took those 3 frames with my other prized queen in it, and I set them in the very, very right side of that 10 frame single, several frames away from all of the bees that were in that big box with no queen. And I thought, I've done that a million times. I have just taken them and I just separate them by 4 or 5 frames, a puff of smoke. By the time they get over, they'll figure it out. They want the queen. Everything is going to be good to go. And guess what happened when I went to go in there to get some grafting material from that one? No queen. Not a queen, not an egg, not a larva, not a nothing. They didn't accept her. Where is she at? I have no idea. She's not in that box, and there's no grafting material now out of 2 colonies because somehow this knucklehead thought that they would just jive and do their thing. So the reason I say that is there is something to be said about some of these time frames that we typically work within, whether it's 24 hours, whether it's 3 days, introducing queens in cages to the colony so they don't rip her head off at first and get. So I think that's why, for me, looking back through all that experience, I've got queen cages in my pockets left and right. Why didn't I just take the queen out of the small colony, put her into a cage, and then put her into the big colony? Why didn't I do that? Because I made a mistake. I should have.
Yappy told you to.
Because
Yappy told you don't worry about it.
Said, do this, do that.
Yeah,
so in that situation, it's like all the things that we think we know, just because they don't have a queen, and we know that they need a queen, doesn't mean that we can just take another hot and juicy queen 3 7 days later and just drop it in there and everything's fine. If I would have pulled the queen out of that big voluptuous hive and then went over to that smaller colony and pulled this queen out and put her in there, I really believe it would have been totally fine. But something happens when they reset that short-term memory, when that pheromone is no longer circulated in the colony, something else happens and all bets are off. And that's important when we're introducing queens to whatever scenario that it is, giving them the time that they need, whether we understand what it is or why it is, whether it's a combination of short-term memory, whether it's a combination of the pheromones with the traces that she's leaving behind the colony. I think all those things play into how we do what we do when we are making these splits. Brian, when you were making your last round of splits, run us through your process on what you typically historically have done when you make splits, as far as the time frame that you make your queens, you make your colonies queenless, and then talk to us about how you introduce your queens. And then we'll go around the virtual room here and we'll talk about our most favorite ways to introduce queens, and then we'll get into the bad ways that we've done it, and we'll get into the ugly ways. So a little round table, short, quick fire kind of thing. Brian, talk to us about what is your best good way that you've to introduce queens to your colonies.
Yep. So when I order my mated queens, typically, and I think this is par for the course most breeders ship out on Mondays that I've ordered. Now, it's a car trip. I hop in the car and drive down. But the other ones, they ship on Mondays, typically get them on Tuesdays. So that being said, I will usually go over on either Saturday or Sunday and do my splits. Now, when I do my splits, I will move, Queen Mama with a couple frames over to a new hive. And that way, that original colony, and this is more for swarm prevention also. That way, that original colony, they'll think, oh, we've swarmed, And then when I get those queens a couple days later, I go over and I'll check the colony, make sure there are no, cells being developed. If there are, they're squished down, and I will put that queen in there, the cage, and it's typically, up until this year, I typically have had 100% success rate doing that. It's a couple days, they know they're without a queen, they're developing theirs get destroyed, so really they have no other choice to, other than to accept what I give them, and it's always worked out. This year it's just throwing me a curveball, so I don't know, what happened this year. It is what it is, what happened this year, but that's typically like the method that I have always done, and it has always worked really well.
Do you shake the bees off your frames when you're checking for queen cells, or
Yep.
you do? Okay,
Yep.
good.
Yep. And typically, like this year, and I even showed it in my videos, and I even explained, why you do that. And like, I'm not, when I'm checking for cells, I really am not that careful. I shake the frames literally every bee off, so I'm looking at everything. And the reason why I do that, and I even explained in my last video, was, well, there's no queen in there, so, and even if there's a cell and you damage it, well, big whoop, because you're putting in a mated queen, so it really doesn't matter. So yeah, I go through everything. Like, I'm pretty thorough when I do that inspection, just because rightfully so, you have to make sure that you take care of any cell that hive is working on. And it, like I said, it usually works out really well. This year, though, it just, they threw me a curveball.
I think we may get there. We get into things that we don't really know. Is when Yappy talked about the pheromone difference between a virgin queen and mated queen. Obviously, we're assuming that all the queens you received were properly mated and everything was good there.
Yeah.
What if there is just some sort of variances in that pheromone that we don't quite understand, that maybe have to do with things that we have to do when we're shipping queens, like ship queens? Maybe something happens when she is at altitude and things change, and maybe something happens, and sometimes maybe it bears a variance on the acceptance. Maybe it doesn't, but it always seems to be, for whatever reason, the queens that you just go pick up and put in, you very rarely, like queen cells, very ever have a problem. But there's something in the act of shipping them and them being in transit that I do think, and when we ship queens every week, that I think does have an impact, does make a difference sometimes on what can happen. Those queens are, even if they are beautifully bred and they are packaged perfectly and they're safe and they're comfortable and they're cool, right? There's those boxes and those bees are still out and exposed to who knows what for how long, and how that may or may not impact their cage, themselves, and also their pheromone and what they give off. I think does make a difference. So I think anything is possible with that,
Yeah, and I mean, something could have gotten on them. I don't know, to where you put them in that colony and they're just like, no, I don't think so. So, it's definitely a learning experience.
Let's talk about what they did as a result here in a minute. Let's get to the bad and the ugly. Let's get into what happened when they decided, okay, we don't like what you gave us. Now what? Bruce, talk to us about what some of your favorite ways, proven ways, the good ways that you had found to make those either splits or use those queens. Walk us through what you typically do to get the highest success, highest take rates for introducing queens.
Well, typically with cells, I'll just stick them in there the next day or two, or sometimes immediately. You can even put them in there, I think, after you split. With mated queens, I've done different things, pretty much like what Brian described. I haven't thought a whole lot about it in the past. I always thought, hey, if this queen's going to be in here for 2 days in that hive before they release her out of that cage, she's probably going to be okay. That's plenty of time for that pheromone to get passed. I did that for years. Didn't really think that much about it. If it was the same day, next day, 2 days later. And then last year was the first time I really thought a lot about, breaking down cells and stuff, because I ordered some those early spring splits I made on the pollination bees from Jose. And then I got some from my buddy Josh down here. And it was about, let's see, 3 or 4 days, maybe even 5 days later when I introduced those queens. I just couldn't get them right after I made the splits. And so I went in and tried to break down all the cells so they would hopefully accept those queens. And it worked fairly well. Some of them did not take, and they made their own queens. I think I just missed some cells. It was getting dark, and I was trying to shake bees and go through a lot of colonies. But, I'm kind of this year with the acceptance rate I've had with the cells, I'm a little bit gun shy. I haven't done any mated queens this year yet. I've got some coming end of May. And then once again, like I said, Greg, earlier, I'd like to get some from you maybe later in the year if you have some available. But I just kind of think we ought to review here what, we've talked a little bit about from Yappy and you, Greg, about dropping a queen in there immediately and about, what Brian did. I do think too, Brian, sometimes there are some environmental factors, and I'm not sure what those may be up there. I'm pretty sure that part of my problem this year has been the weather has just been crazy, just weird. It hasn't been super hot or super cold. It's just been kind of inconsistent and weird. And I think we've had a lot of that across the South, just some weird cold snaps or too much rain at the wrong time and things like that. But I don't know if there were some environmental factors, Brian, that may have contributed to that, even though the queens were in the hives as far as, they should have been accepted theoretically. I just really don't know what caused that. And I know there's good quality queens that, they sell thousands of them and they're good quality queens. And so it just makes you wonder. But I think, before we get off of here tonight, I'm not sure what time how much longer we're going to go, but we need to really kind of review maybe some of the Greg from being a queen breeder, kind of what your recommendations are as far as time frames for people. I know we've got a lot of beginner beekeepers on here and folks that may be trying to do this maybe for the first time, or maybe just some review on that. So if we could I'm sure you're thinking about doing that, but maybe review some actual time frames that you've seen the most success at. But I used to just drop them in there. I just cage queen, candy plug, stick it in the hive within a couple of days of the split, and I had really good success rates. And that's kind of how I typically like to do it. I prefer to do it that way.
Seems to work out pretty good. Yappy, I know what you specialize and focus in, all things Yappy. You're sucking bees out of soffits and out of rafters and floor joists and walls and catching swarms and doing this and doing that. So you're going into a different but similar situation. You're pulling queens from, active colonies. You might be taking all the bees with you. You might be catching virgins and caging them and doing all these things. How does making splits or increase with your yards and what you do, how does introducing queens, what does that look like for you with the goals that you have doing the things that you're doing? What is your fail-proof way of introducing queens in those colonies in your context?
Well, generally, I like to get them dressed up, and then I say, "Hello, queen."
Oh, well, there you have it.
There you go.
That'll work.
Goes to town.
Why not? No, this one will really throw you a curveball. So, as far as the introducing queens and everything else, I go and I do removal. Most every time, I'm going to catch the queen by hand, put her in a cage, finish the job, set the the queen either in the box or on top of it, throw it in the back seat of the truck, come home, set a box up, dump them all in, set the queen on top of the frames, put the lid on, see you in a couple of days. Some of the bees will drift off into other colonies, come back, you know, like I said, after a couple of days, let them get set up, start drawing comb, go ahead and release the queen out. That way they're locked to the box. Kind of balance it out, figure out how many bees did we lose because of the reorientation thing, because I don't generally lock them up. I mean, I've got one yard that when I do removal, that's where they go into, and you know, let them do their thing. So what'll really get your goat is y'all aren't gonna like me. Half of you already don't, and it's fine. I don't care. When you start sending me Christmas cards, all right, and then you don't, then I'll feel bad because you don't like me. But I want you to like me. So I know I'm a bad man, but I love you. If I love you, does that count? So I'm all about the management process. Okay, I whenever I speak at little bee whatchamacallums, bee groups, it always comes up where, you know, people will turn around, they ask, how many colonies do you keep?
Right.
Well, I keep 25. That's my number, 25. I'll do more bee removals this week than that. All right. But it's what I do with those 25 and how I build them that changes up everything that you guys, with Brian, the closet sideliner. Brian, I'm telling you, it's time to come out of the closet, buddy. I mean, I haven't even said hello to Brian yet. Hey, Brian.
He hasn't even talked to me.
I love your hat, Brian.
I was gonna sit and hold a little quail bird, but since Yappy didn't say hello to me, I'm not going to do that.
I'm telling you, yeah. Somebody mentioned it. I seen it earlier when somebody mentioned about wanting to see Yappy's birds, and then you
James.
said, "Well, I got 25 of them right behind me." James, I saw that. Frank. So, my Tourette's kicking in. But I will go and do a removal, and I'll look at brood patterns. I'll check a few things out. If I don't like what I see, I'll keep that queen, and I'll, you know, me and her will have a talk later off to the side by herself.
Uh-oh.
Did we lose him? Oh,
Yappy, you there? Come back, Yappy.
There we go.
Oh,
I'm back.
There it is.
so we lost you there for a minute.
Whew! Brian, quit
Pins and
messing with
needles.
things. That's what
Pins
Brian
and needles.
I finally said hi to him. He's mad.
Right.
So anyway, so I take the queen, and I just do other things with her, but she never makes it back to her bees. But based on everything we talk about adding queens to a box of bees and her accepting them, have you ever turned around and dropped 3 or 4 pounds of bees into an established beehive with no queen? The box has a queen, but just adding all of a sudden out of nowhere, dropping 3 pounds of bees that an hour ago were in a wall with a queen, and everybody's
What
happy.
happens?
How does that happen? Huh?
Yappy shakes and bakes Ricky Bobby and throws them in there. How do they react? What do they do?
They basically they just I smoked the bees in the box, set my bee vac top on that, slide it out the bottom thing, and just let them dump in there. Everybody goes on about their business. Puff, puff, smoke, smoke. And then I'll let them kind of start acclimating and do their things. You'd be surprised at half the time the ones that were coming out of the catch box, actually all of a sudden they start to fanning and going crazy. It's like, hey, we're back home. And they don't even realize they got moved. So when earlier, when the question was asked about reintroducing a queen, will they remember her? I asked the question back of saying, did they really have a memory of her, or were they just happy that they had the pheromone of?
Ooh.
Because if I can take a queen out and I can puff some smoke and put another queen in a box and there's never a problem, do this within a 10-minute window. Find the queen on
the
a frame,
memories.
put her in another cage, put her in my pocket, right? Puff a little bit more smoke down in there and drop another queen in. This is what I do. I do not recommend, Grammy. Don't be doing this. All right? No,
The
no,
thoughts,
Grammy.
views, and expressions of Yappy the Bee Man do not necessarily affect those of the ones that stream Team Beekeeping Chat.
Thank you. So I can fix my problems. Well, in a bee box, the other problems I can't. But what I'm saying is, if they remembered that pheromone from 10 minutes ago, would they not go to killing this queen?
Exactly.
So just a thought.
This is the more questions on questions show. It's just no matter how deep you dive, even if we had somebody who had all the answers, there is just one question after the other with it. So that's why I asked the question, what has worked for you guys? What I'm hearing out of everybody is whether you're dumping 3 pounds of bees in a queen into a queenless colony and accept her right away. For those who are using nukes, and they will just take a strong nuke, 4 to 5 frame nuke with a queen, and they will go into a strong colony that is queenless, and they will just plug in that nuke into that colony and walk away, and they all get along. It's like, wait a minute, there was no queen introduction period. There's no, like, there wasn't the right music and the right setting, and everything is just hunky dory. We just literally combined 2 separate colonies, one that was angrily queenless with one that was hunky dory. We throw them all together, and it's almost like it's the survey says the majority of the bees in this box like this queen, so therefore we're all going in that direction. Get on board or get off. But if we would have just take that queen on one frame with a half a frame of bees and plug that whole situation into double deeps that's queenless. Whoa, wait a minute. What just happened? Well, they just decapitated the queen and ran her out. So how is it when we put the field force with her and the colony and the support staff with the queen and everything is fine, they take her? But if we just give it her, they don't. It speaks to what we're kind of hinting on, the things that I don't think really know. But when those bees are exchanging the pheromones, whatever that their task or job or situation in their life at that moment is, it seems to be all of a sudden they can get on board with something, or they can jump off real quick, and they can all of a sudden decide, oh, cool, new mama, great. Half the people like it, or half the bees like it. We're all heading forward. Great, boom, let's go, and they get on with it. To me, that is absolutely fascinating. That just a small little change, a little nuance, and how many bees are with the queen when we introduce her to that colony, the whole dynamic changes. Like, to me, that is like, what is going on here? That is really cool. For us, what I'll say is when we are selling queens to folks and they're asking, how do we do this? How do we make the split? When we introduce the queen, what has worked the vast majority of the time, like you guys have already mentioned, is to make that split and then 24 hours later introduce that mated queen in a cage. We primarily only deal with queens that have attendants inside of there. Sometimes I think that could create a problem for you if they're not getting along and those bees are fighting back and forth in the cage, and they automatically associate mama in the cage as being a problem. But I've never had that actually be a problem. For us, it's almost as though when we have attendants in the cage and we're making those splits, when you're putting her in 24 hours later, no matter what the memory mechanism is, if it's pheromone only or if it is a short-term memory of having a queen, regardless of that, by putting her in a cage, I think gives the opportunity to where if they're not like super hunky-dory with mama, and ordinarily they might start running her off or chewing at her wings or chewing at her legs, they can't really get to her and do that. And then by the time they start working through that candy, now think about this. What if the bees are so upset that there's something new inside of that colony and that is not that's not all the baby's mama in that colony, and they start tearing through that candy to get at the queen faster to kill her, and then 3 days happens and then it's like, what are we doing here again? Let's just keep let's just keep chewing through this candy. There is something that does seem to happen when we give them that 3-day period where they accept her just fine. But if we were to put no candy in there and direct release that queen in that cage 24 hours later, hey, those take rates just absolutely plummeted. And there's something different that happens with those bees in that 24 to 36 hour period where I think that's why it's important to have them in the cage in those scenarios. So we always recommend folks that make their split 24 hours later, 24 to what's nice about 24 hours is mama is out of the colony before they have the opportunity to cap a replacement. If you wait any longer than that, if you wait 3 to 5 days to introduce that queen, I think maybe it's a memory thing or who knows what it is. When they start getting dedicated and committed and they're all in on making those queen cells, sometimes I have seen it where they are saying, hey, our future hope for this colony is these queen cells. And they look at that queen that's in a cage as not being a part of that program, and they may let her out just to kill her. Sometimes we've seen where the bees are so hopelessly queenless, maybe queenless too long, even past 9 or 10 days, where they will start to make those cells. If you give them that queen and that if you knock down those cells and then give it to her 10, 11, 12, 14 days later, they'll let mama out so she can lay a handful of eggs, and then they'll make queen cells off of those and then kill mama. Why in the world is that? She came from a beautifully productive, she was a voluptuous, juicy queen ready to go, but for some reason they didn't like her. They only let her out long enough to make her replacement, and then they kill her. Why did they do that? I have no idea, but I think we get into these time frame things where we don't understand all of the nuance when we go from 24 hours to 36 hours to 5 days to 12 days to 14. We get into this weird understanding of how the bees react to the situations, and then how committed are they to that course of action versus what we're trying to impart on that colony. I think there's some kind of a variance in there that we really fully don't understand, but 24 hours has always seemed to be nearly bulletproof for us. Yappy, you're giving me the timeout. What's on your mind there?
I forgot.
Bruce, what were you going to say?
No, yeah, I had something. I had a job duty for Brian, but Bruce, go ahead.
We'll circle back to you, Yappy. Bruce, what are you thinking about?
Well, I think that's probably the wisest thing to do. That one issue Brian mentioned earlier with a lot of queen breeders, when they mail them, they have one day of the week that they mail those queens. And so say that's a Monday. If the typical backyard or hobby beekeeper or sideliner beekeeper is doing their splits the prior Saturday and Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that queen doesn't arrive till Tuesday or Wednesday. That's kind of where those windows get a little bit clouded, if that makes sense. You say 3 to 4 days later they can start capping queen cells, then you're kind of in that situation. So I guess the recommendation is just to break those queen cells down. Any queen cells you find, do you feel like you need to do that before that time frame, before they're capped? If they're open queen cells, do you feel like you need to break them down, or can you just drop that queen in there?
Well, that's where this gets into some weird territory, because what we do, because this is going to sound ridiculous, and if you either you get it or you don't, and if you don't, that's totally okay. But literally every step that we take in a colony, every motion of a hive tool, every puff of the smoker, all adds up to energy exerted and time spent doing all of these tasks. So we have to be as efficient as we possibly can. Okay. When we are going and we're harvesting queens, what we are literally doing is we have that timed to where we have ripe cells that are ready to go. As we are pulling queens and caging them, while that lid is off and that frame is open, I am now dropping a capped ripe cell that's going to be hatching in 2 days. When I do that, they have no opportunity to make anything else, because in 24 to 48 hours, that virgin is emerging from that cell before they even get to the time frame where they have the appropriate aged larva to start making the queen from. Now, they could wait, and if they decide to go into go mode within immediately, right, they might start to draw out and make those little small cups. But when we put the queen cell in, she hatches, they go about their business. In that interval, we can change the direction of where they're wanting to go, how they've pointed that ship, because now they've got a virgin queen out and boom, they're ready to go. But if we wait and if we do pull a queen, when we come back, let's say they decide to start making a new queen day 1, right? Okay. When we get into that time period where that cell is now capped, let's say around day 7 total in that time frame, if I were to go drop my own queen cell in there along with theirs at day 7, even though mine might be hatching in 24 to 48 hours, you know what they're going to do to my cell most of the time? They're going to tear my cell down, right? They know the difference. They know mine is not part of their system or their plan, and they tear mine down. But if I go in there and I tear theirs down on day 7 when theirs are capped, and then I put mine on, somehow they have figured out, and they know so fast that they have no future opportunity. The moment I am crushing those cells, now all they have is my cell. They take it. I will never understand how the bees are in tune and how they move so quick to know those things, but it's absolutely mind-blowing when you start to see them do and react and behave. It's like, wow, that is super cool. Bruce, what are you thinking about?
What about with the with mated queens as far as that goes? You know, the cells I understand, but mated queens, do you think? Because once again, with the hobbyists that may just be able to do splits on weekends, and they order, say for example, in my case, I may order 20 queens, right? So I don't have time in the evenings after work, after I've broken the splits out the previous weekend, to really just go in and do a lot of work. So what I'd love to do is be able to get the queens, you know, the day after and just drop them in, you know, in their cages, candy, you know, let them eat through the candy and release the queen. But if it's, say, day 4 when that queen arrives after I made the split, do you think that you need to go and break those cells down even if they're not capped, or do you think you just got to go through and break all the cells down, right?
I always recommend that.
What is the difference between 24 to 48 hours versus 48 to 72 hours, for example, in that case? I just, for some reason, my confidence after last year, I didn't have a great success rate take on the queens. And then this year with the sales that I did early, my confidence is kind of like, after I've introduced probably hundreds of queens, but for some reason, the last couple of years, it's been a little more tricky for me. I'm not sure what I've done differently or wrong. And if you just take it, like say, for example, you pull a split and you have a queen, like if you get your queens in the mail, you go out, you make the split and put the queen cage in there with the mated queen. Why can't you just do that? You know, because it's still going to be 2 or 3 days before they chew her out of there. So should that be okay as well? I guess is a question. Why do you wait 24 hours?
Those are good questions. I don't have the glasses that make me look nearly as smart as you guys, and I don't have the scientific backing that Yappy does, because Yappy's not only does he have the experience, but he's got he knows all these. Look how smart he looks just when he does that. Here's what I'm going to say. I don't know how to put this in a scientific way, so I'm just going to describe it the best way I can and keep it as short as possible. There is something that happens when we are operating. If we look at my screen here and we're talking about a scale of time, and if we start on this side, as this part of the scale is when they have experienced the queenless opportunity, right? When we go, if it's 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, there's a time frame that it takes for them to start to do enough work where they commit to the work, and that is the future hope. Okay, the further we get to this time period here where that work is already committed, that cell is already capped, they've put the time into feeding, keeping it warm, nurturing, spending all the traffic going back and forth, maybe expressing the pheromone of what their duty is, their job, going back and forth, the closer they get to that time period where the work that they're doing, when that bun in the oven is now ready to pull and she's ready to hatch, it is a lot harder to course correct that situation if we're not very thorough and facetious with going in there and knocking down all their work. Something definitely happens. If we get in there and they are getting ready, when you look up inside of that cell and it's starting to be a voluptuous cell just before they close it off, and as they're closing it off, in my experience, if we just add a mated queen to that scenario, a lot of times they're going to reject that queen because they already feel like they are already committed to that future hope, and they don't want what we give them. But if we get in there on the early side of that time frame, where we just pulled a queen out and we shipped her, or we let them go ahead and make every possible opportunity to make their future hope, and I mean this respectfully, with as much reverence to the bees as possible, But when we go in there and crush all their future hopes and dreams and possibilities of making any queen on their own, and now they have nothing, whatever we give them, no matter the quality, no matter what it is, they readily take because it is their only hope. Now, if there is an issue with the queen that we're giving them, or they still don't like it, like we mentioned earlier, and maybe even in Brian's scenario, for whatever the reason might be, they are somehow smart enough and know that although we don't want you here, you're our best chance for future survival. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep you on a very short leash. We're going to let you out. We're going to go ahead and let you make 10 or 12 eggs. We're going to choose from the very best ones of those. And now those are going to be our future queens because we made them. And I'm sorry, by the way, but off with your head. Like, we get into such crazy nuance with the bees choosing what they do. We don't know. But here's what I do know. The earlier we get on the time frame before they can even think about eggs turning into larvae, let alone capping it at day 7 or 8. If we get in way before that and make that adjustment, they readily accept it way better than if we try to put in a cell or a queen in an environment where they already have the future hope active and going. So that's why we always recommend 24 hours later, drop your, I got to be careful of being dropped because we've had new beginning beekeepers say, what do you mean drop? Like, you actually you're dropping these things and you don't just, so we're placing the mated queen in that colony at 24 hours at the right time. They don't really have anything else going on yet, and everything is happening within the time frame where she is out and possibly laying or expressing herself before they really have the opportunity to take anything to the next level, and they take her. So either do it at 24 hours. If you wait any longer than that, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 7, 9, or 10, I am a firm believer of shaking the snot out of all of those frames, shaking the bees off, and make sure you don't just have even the tiniest little baby cup started somewhere. Go through and knock every single one of those down. And I mean this with love and respect and reverence, but you have to crush and smother and obliterate every possible plan that they have for future hope, so then you can give them their next piece to move forward with. Bruce, that's a long answer to say sooner the better, but if you wait, crush all the cells.
That's a good job. I appreciate it. That explained a lot. Yappy, you had something you were thinking about.
I've got homework for Brian.
Uh-oh.
What do I have to do?
Homework.
I don't like homework.
There's been I need a 7-page essay on, can bees actually move eggs? Do they move eggs into queen cells? Does the queen lay it in there? Can a bee literally steal an egg from another colony and move it to a last resort hope to put a queen cell in?
How dare you even suggest that there's magic going on inside of a colony outside of the textbooks, Yappy? How dare you?
The point, let me tell you this, in helping you out with your homework, I know of one time in 10 years where that's actually happened, where a queen cell with a viable queen showed up in a colony that was queenless and had no abilities to make a queen.
Huh.
Wow, that's cool.
And they pulled one single egg and one single cell out of their abdomen.
Just like John says, that's crazy talk.
Is it?
That's crazy talk.
Or isn't it? I've seen some crazy things too, where all of a sudden queen cells show up on the wood sidebars or the very bottom where there's nothing going on. Absolutely. It's like its own little island of queen cell that popped up off a sidebar where it wasn't there before. There's no eggs around it, and the entire frame of it is nothing but pollen and nectar. But yet here's this weird magical queen cell hanging right off the wood where there's nothing else going on. How does that happen?
Well, Brian has pulled
Magic.
some really good interviews out of his phone book and put on some of his videos. Did you ever interview anybody from Florida? that's under Jamie Ellis. Did you ever get anybody from Florida?
Cameron Jack.
Okay. Get a hold of Cameron and ask him if they've ever done, and if anybody in the comments, I'd love to know where to read this. I'm asking. So, as the queen gets older, we say the pheromone gets less. And when that strong pheromone's not there, they replace her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that has anything to do with pheromone production and the amount of spermatheca that is left in her pipes? Do the two have anything
and then the pipes? That was like yin and yang. That was great.
Hey, we got this family show. Okay,
it's almost like we're talking about the birds and the bees.
Grammy is still in there, so we have got to keep it family orientated. But ask Chat. I almost would, except for Chat ended up a task that Chat could not do without human intervention. And the son of a gun turns around and he puts out a want ad for somebody to come over and do something, and paid him $16 an hour to do whatever it was so he could complete the task. Chat.
Hey,
but that's pretty cool, Brian.
Yappy, you know where Grammy works, don't you?
Where's Grammy work? I don't know.
She works for a OBGYN, I'm pretty sure. So she understands that kind of stuff.
Wow, still, look at that, Brian.
Whether she understands,
he's got the birds.
I'm not. Oh, is this Brian trying to get out of his homework assignment?
Frank Jr.
No, I mean we're talking about the birds and the bees.
That's right, the birds and the bees.
I see what he did.
Let me tell you something. Frank would rip your face off right now to eat that. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah.
But it's so cute. I don't want Frank to eat it.
That was perfect, Brian. What are we talking about here?
I want it to get bigger so I can eat it.
Birds and the bees.
There. Nice. Yeah. Guys, we could go on all night talking about all these things. And I feel like whenever we get on here and talk about stuff, we open up so many cans of worm. All we were trying to do is talk about how do we quickly get some queens going and get cages and all this introduction. But when we start digging in and trying to understand, well, what's going on inside of a colony when we're introducing, like that is a lot of talk you don't ever hear really go on. That is so important. It's one thing to just tell people how to do something. Well, take 24 hours and do da-da-da-da-da, but if we try to dig in, well, why does that work or why doesn't that work? That's a super big deal, because once we start seeing like rogue and weird things, or things that are happening that are abnormal, when things happen like abnormal, when things happen like Brian this year, where he's had massive failure on the splits from those queens that he brought in, when you've done that way and it's always worked, it's like, well, why is that? What is going on? Local environs? Is it weather? Is it who knows what? Like Bruce said, there are so many things that can possibly happen. When we think about if we are trying to mimic nature and work with nature rather than against it, one of the best times to actually make queens and to make splits is actually playing to that swarm tendency of the bees, letting the bees get all the way that far to do it, and then they happen. But what happens when the lights go out and we get cold, rainy weather, and there is no nectar and there is no pollen, and the bees are not swarming in that time frame? They're going to wait until that first 75-degree day and then start to do that. Like, did something happen inside that colony when you split them, they go through all of that, and now you give them those queens? Does something happen inside that colony where they're like, well, this is not how this is done, knucklehead? No, we don't take these queens. We'll let her out. Well, she can lay some eggs, but we're going to do this our way. And, there are bees sometimes just like us, but we're just stubborn knuckleheads. We're going to do it our way, come hell or high water, and that's just what's going to happen. We're maybe giving them too much of our brain power and logical tendency. But the long and short of it is, no matter what we do, we can do the best job that we can. We can introduce the best queens to the best colonies or the best conditions and circumstances, the best way we know how. But the bees can still humble us. And I think that's one of the things that just keeps so many of us coming back over and over and over again, because we will never master this. No amount of piece of paper or education or badge or a plaque hanging on the wall will ever get you to the point where you are actually ever going to master these critters. And I think that is what brings so many of us back over and over and over again to just trying to figure out what is it about these bugs in the box. As we close it up here, Yappy, you have any final thoughts?
Guys, thank you very much for having me on again, and let me just, throw some brain juice out at you. This is the first time I've ever been on here, and Brian's been so quiet. It's kind of weird. Now Bruce has been his perfect gentleman self, as he always is. That's what we love about Bruce. He is the perfect gentleman. Brian, though, I'm surprised he still has fingernails. But
I'm upset. I'm upset because I hear about all this canning that's taken place, and I didn't get a package in the mail.
Well, you know what? See, the thing is a couple weeks ago, Brian just happened to send me a text with a picture with his 5-6 year ago, whatever, barbecue grill smoker out. And, he's talking about, he's like, oh, yeah, he don't want you to feel bad with the, and he's got this slab of ribs out there. He just had to make sure I knew that he
humble brag. That's what you call a humble brag.
So I have homework. No, I have my homework assignment, but
yes,
I don't want to go down. I don't want to digress too much here. But what I want to see take place. So I have my homework assignment. What I want to see take place is that next year's Hive Life, I want to see that hawk bring in your barbecue in that jar. Can you fly that thing into the conference center and deliver the barbecue?
Well, Brian, that's a great question. We'll have to bring that one up to Cayman Reynolds and see what he has to say about that.
Let's put a pin in that one, shall we?
Yes. Can we just let's circle back to that question a little bit later. Cayman, if you get rumored that we were actually bringing that up, I'm still sorry that I caught you at a bad time with a bird. Anyway, it was all my fault. Now, listen here before I go. Guys, we have talked about a whole lot of things. There's always variables, all right? The safe way to go, if you guys are new beekeepers or, a couple years into it, if you're willing to vary from the things that we have talked about or that are the books tell you to do, the monthly meeting people, the president of the bee club and the association, and Bob Benny tell you to do, have a backup plan to fix it if you break it.
True.
Okay, I can fix anything in my yard that I break or whatever. Okay. I can fix that. I always have a backup plan. So if you want to go into your yard and pull a queen out and toss her over in another box just to see if you can do it, have a backup plan just in case. Because I talked to a guy on the phone today that came up with one of the weirdest questions in the world. He had a once in a lifetime, you will never, ever, ever experience. And he did right there on his little shoulder. I'll let him tell you about it someday. One that maybe you'll find out, maybe you won't. But I can explain it. But you have to see it before I can explain it. All I'm saying is,
what a tease! I am all ears. I can't wait to hear about this in the future releases.
Well, just have a backup plan. You love the bug in the box, but what do you really know about it? Learn about them, and I try to throw thought processes out. If you don't think anything else, go look up the short-term memory and long-term memory of bees, because that information alone will help you to understand how to manipulate your colonies to do things that the books don't tell you how to do, because they keep it simple, stupid. It's remove the queen, wait a while, and then put the new queen in, wait 3 days, and then if they haven't eaten the candy out, then pop it open and pray to God she don't fly off in the process or they don't kill her. All right, that's the normal what the books tell you. But there are other ways, and it's going to work for you 99% of the time, 98% of the time, but there's going to be that 1 or 2% where something didn't go right. And, Greg gave us a couple of examples. No matter what he did, the 2 best queens that he had in the yard no longer there. So just have a backup plan, and but don't be afraid to experiment and learn about the bees. Pay attention, learn things, and thanks for letting me be on.
Thanks for being here. I love what you said, and I love what you brought to the table here, creating that dialogue and forcing us to really think about that short-term and that long-term memory, how that plays into queenlessness, when we can introduce a queen, what are we actually introducing when we introduce a queen, what does that have to do with pheromone and forgetfulness of the bees? Well, if you're just now tuning in, you're going to have to go all the way back in time and check it out, because Yappy just did this to all of us. Mind blown. Yappy, thanks for being on here. Looking forward to having you on in the future. And maybe there is some kind of a surprise collaborative video thing going on you don't want to miss. And I would highly encourage you, if you love Yappy the Bee Man, and if you love the stream team, go over to Grammy's Midwife Suburban Homestead YouTube channel, subscribe, hit that notification bell, because there is something really cool, really unique that 99.9% of all beekeepers have never seen and will never see in their entire beekeeping career that she caught on camera. You don't want to miss it. Make sure you go over there and check that out. Brian, final thoughts for you as we wrap this thing up.
You know I'm horrible on these final thoughts. I just always defer.
Okay, well, I'll take the spot.
Okay, go ahead, Yappy. Give us Brian's final thoughts.
Well, barbecue and bees and birds.
Brian, what's coming up this week at Castle Hives?
Oh man, I tell you what, it's just more or less monitor what's going on, making sure that I got some colonies that are looking like they're gonna get honey bound, believe it or not. So I gotta start stacking some colonies up, and it's just monitor those few. So I think, like I said, I think just time will, another week will tell what direction I go with a couple of the colonies, but it's okay. What happens, it's okay. I'm not at a loss because I still have more colonies than I've ever had. So, but yeah, it's just, I'll dig in and really check on those few. And I do have, in the next few days, I'll be filming a video for a product that you guys know Jason and I have been working on, and it was actually at the Hive Life. But it's a perfect moment for me to film that product just because of everything that's going on in my apiary. So it'll make it very easy for someone to look down into their apiary and say, well, that hive there's good. Oh, that one there, I spotted a virgin there. Oh, I know that one there had cells. So, but I'll be filming that here coming up and staying busy, staying busy.
Awesome. Bruce, what's going on in your neck of the woods for this next week? What are your final thoughts?
A couple of quick things. A couple of videos dropped this week that I think are kind of fun and pretty good. One of them, we revisit Big Red down in Slocum and how she's doing, as well as the 4-way split I did about, 12 weeks ago now, back on Valentine's Day. As far as the bees go, just going to be we're trying to manage space, just kind of check on them, and not a lot of actual, manipulations or splits or anything going on right now. I am going to be checking Corey's queens here soon to see what the result was there. It'll be interesting to find out. I really am a little gun shy. This year has been so strange down here. Yappy, I'm not sure what it's been like up there, but down here in the southeast part of Alabama, it's just been a weird year. I've never seen anything quite like this. You hear about those years where things are just strange in beekeeping, and this has been one of those years down here. I'm hoping to salvage a honey crop. Maybe that tallow is starting to kick in now, and so hopefully we'll have a good 3 to 4 weeks of tallow, and be able to fill some of those boxes up so I can get some money, because I got a lot of customers. It's funny. I've sold a fair amount of 5-gallon buckets over the year, but I had some on my website. About 3 weeks ago, I had a viewer ordered a bucket from me. Then he wanted another one, and then he wanted another one. I'm like, I can't sell anymore. I'm almost out of honey, but I'll put one more on there. Well, I put that joker on there, that bucket, and then somebody else snatched it up from Kentucky. So he didn't get it, but I'm like, I'm sorry, man. I can't sell anymore because I'm just about out, and I'm afraid it's going to be a kind of a low crop this year. But we're just right now, we're kind of in a holding pattern. We're just managing space, checking the bees. Don't really have a lot of treatments going on, not a lot of splits going on right now. Just kind of right now we're focusing on that honey and getting those and making sure those queens are mated. And obviously with the issues I've had with drone layers and even some laying worker colonies, I'm just kind of peeking in. If the hive looks weak, I'm going a little deeper and I'm finding some of that. So we'll just be trying to just kind of really just kind of in a holding pattern right now. Nothing too crazy going on right now.
Well, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight to the Nature's Image Farm podcast, the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat. If you're listening live with us, thanks for hanging in and having fun talking about queens, talking about bees. If you're listening to the replay, hey, we love you too. Thanks for tuning in. A lot of stuff going on at the farm this week. We're building them up, splitting them out, making queens, getting them mated, getting the orders shipped out. We love you guys. We appreciate what you're doing and helping us out, supporting the farm. We have an order coming in from Premier Bee Products, a bunch of foundation boxes, the whole 9 yards. If you're in the Ohio area and you're looking for the best wax dipped equipment out there, Premier Bee frames and foundation, we would love to get those to you. Can't wait. Keep us in mind, naturesimagefarm.com here in Hopewell, Ohio. Keep an eye on our website because those are going to be shipping everywhere very soon, right here from the farm. The stuff that we use, speak to, they have experience with and love. We're making it available for everybody else too. Keep an eye out, naturesimagefarm.com. A lot of fun stuff happening. Just again, want to thank you guys for being a part of this. Thanks for supporting the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat. And thanks again for checking out Brian's channel over at Castle Hives, Bruce's channel over at Bruce's Bees, and the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only Yappy Beeman. Check him out. Show him some love. We'll see you next time, Wednesday, 8 p.m. for another Stream Team Beekeeping Chat. As always, remember, be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time, guys. Take care.